Okay, we are starting on project 7, Bootstrap responsive page, starting on page 303 actually is the start of it. Since last chapter, I have had the opportunity to talk with the book manufacturer, and they do have PowerPoints for this, so I will start including some PowerPoints in the introduction. One of the things that you need to understand is as time continues to go on with HTML and CSS and the size of the monitors that are being used, and we now know that well over 50% are now being used on smartphones only, it's time to really start considering how we design our web pages and keeping in mind that smartphones are going to do nothing but take over the market eventually. Not saying that there won't still be desktops and laptops, but because of the mobility of mobile phones, the usage is just going to continue to go up and up. So one of the things that you need to always keep in mind from here on out is what's called responsive design. That means designing from mobile phone on up. Now, obviously, if you are designing on a mobile phone, you're not going to be putting as much information on a web page as you would if you were designing for a laptop or a desktop. One of the easiest ways that Dreamweaver handles this is with coding from something called Bootstrap. Now, I still have very mixed feelings about this because throughout the years of coding, other than HTML and CSS, I've seen bunches of different coding types of coding go in favor and out of favor. So right now, Bootstrap's the hot thing and everybody's using it. So I will go ahead and introduce you to it as it's been done in the book. It looks like a relatively powerful program. If you like it, you really should spend more time with it because I think it can help you answer a few of the issues that we deal with just trying to code in HTML. So it can be very helpful. Working with Bootstrap, web designers have always had to deal with different display sizes when creating pages. For example, different users might have a 30-inch desktop or an 11-inch laptop, but a good web page should effectively work on both as well as anything in between. The explosive growth of digital tablets and smartphones further compounds this problem, giving us even much smaller displays. With HTML5 and CSS3, web designers now have the opportunity and the responsibility to create pages that are optimal for viewing on whatever the device the user chooses. Rather than creating multiple versions of a website for specific types of devices, we can use what's called responsive design to create pages that automatically adapt to suit the device size and how the pages display. Bootstrap is an HTML and CSS-based framework that allows for much faster and easier web development, including responsive web page design. Bootstrap CSS classes predefine the appearance of various elements such as typography, images, and forms, as well as many of the interactive components like the navigation menus and the image carousels. You can use Bootstrap to design a page that changes in appearance, even its content, to present information in the best way possible for the screen size being used. The tool built into Dreamweaver makes it relatively easy to create responsive web pages using Bootstrap. However, you still need a solid foundation of CSS before you can effectively and efficiently take advantage of the available tools. You should understand how div tags work. Remember, div tags are just boxes, you guys. And how to create the various types of CSS selectors. Remember, those are just the rules we write to control the appearance of different page elements. You should have a good working knowledge of how basic Dreamweaver tasks such as accessing the page code of various files, including the page source code and the code in the related files. Dreamweaver supports both the current versions of Bootstrap. Now they're running on 4.0. We will be running on one slightly later, but I don't see any differences between the two, as well as Bootstrap 3.37. 3.3.7. Anyway, you should know there are significant differences between the two versions, although the underlying concepts such as page grids and media queries apply at both versions, and the details explain the project are based on Bootstrap 4. Now, understanding the Bootstrap page grid, what you need to realize and what you need to think about are columns. Bootstrap sets up 12 columns per row. Okay, columns are like the columns that hold up a roof, and that's the way I want you to think of it. Okay, so there are 12 maximum per row. So that means if you have any more columns, it would in a row, it would bump it to the next line. So be aware of that. So 12 is the max for any row. And then at the bottom of page 305, it talks about display sizes and how they relate to columns. So it's really important that you read pages 305 and 306. Okay, they do not go further into responsive design for mobile, which is on page 306, and it shows you how the different screen sizes kind of can be broken out over those columns, and understanding what media query is. Media query means that when the device first hits your web page, okay, it has the ability to read the device's window size. And based on that window size, what kind of information will be displayed to the device. So obviously, the smaller the screen, the less information that we are going to put on that web page for that screen. And so therefore, you won't see as much. You may have more links. So anyway, that's what the whole chapter is about, and how we design for all the different pages. So it's quite interesting. It's probably a little bit more complex than you're used to, but if you follow the steps carefully and the videos carefully throughout this chapter, you will get through and it will make sense to you. So anyway, this is a good chapter to really read through carefully as we go, and really take close note on how everything happens. Okay, on one final note on Bootstrap, the page you are going to create in this project should be considered a basic introduction to working with Bootstrap. You will create a page with two basic layouts, one for the extra small and medium layouts, and one for the large and extra large. You will have a few basic Bootstrap components to implement in page design, and you will define a few simple media queries to control appearance of the page in the different layouts. Keep in mind that there are many more options related to Bootstrap than those that you will use in this project. Responsive design is quickly becoming the rule, not the exception, in professional web design. We highly encourage you to continue your education in responsive design beyond what is covered in this project. And again, the reason for that is because that's where all of web design is heading. It's going to be mobile first, because mobile phones are now a very prevalent part of the marketplace. Okay, now the second one here is creating a Bootstrap page, which is very simple. All you need to do, instead of, you still start with HTML on the left, but on the right hand side you will see two different selections, and you select the second tab, which is the Bootstrap one, and then set up your priorities from there. And that's based all on page 308 and 309. And then you can start your web page from there, and it sets up your basic web page sizes for you. Now let's talk a little bit about media queries. I'm going to see if I can blow this up a little bit so we can take a closer look. Okay. A media query is a way of defining what size pages are being made and what is going to work for what. So anyway, it's all tied into CSS, and again, because CSS is cascading, it's a top-down approach. So the first media query would be for your cell phone, and then it goes up from there. So the further down the list on the CSS with media queries, the larger it gets. So always do the cell phone first and work down the line. Now, if you end up next semester taking the secondary HTML course, the book that I recommended that Daniel use, hopefully he will, is an excellent book because it uses the same approach even with hand coding. So keep that in mind, and that might be a course that you might want to go ahead and take so you really get this coding down. I think you would find it extremely helpful for your future. So definitely consider doing that. Next, you need to be aware that when you work with Bootstrap that there's a bunch of dependent files that will need to be uploaded to the web server that are generated as soon as you build the Bootstrap page. It will be located in the same folder where you build the Bootstrap page. So all you need to do after you're done designing the web page is not only make sure that all your web files go up, your normal web files go up, but that your Bootstrap files go up also in order for the page to work correctly. So do not forget the dependent files that happen. You'll see them right at the top along with the other CSS files, but those files all have to be uploaded to the server in order for your web page to work correctly. Okay, next. These are the different displays that will happen when you build a Bootstrap page. Okay, the smaller one, the next size up, the medium, the large, and extra large. So those are your 5 pages that Bootstrap will develop when you build a Bootstrap setup. Next, okay, visual query bar is at the top of the screen. You will notice, I don't think this is really going to show it clear enough for you to see, but be aware that, it's not. Okay, but right at the top you will see your different sizes. Okay, it's called the visual something or other bar. I can't find it right at the moment, but visual media query bar is what it is. And so all you have to do is click on each one of these and it will take you to that size. The green bars are media queries that use only a maximum width value. The blue bars are media queries that use both minimum and width and maximum width value. And the purple bars are media queries that use only a minimum width. So you've got different sets of bars up there to work with. Now, there's 2 types of containers. You should always put a container around your web page, and that's the very first thing you're going to build is the container, and you all also put your pictures generally inside a container. You have a regular container and you have a container that's fluid. Now, a regular container is one that usually has a pixel width and a pixel height. And a container dash fluid is one that will change depending on the media query. So you might want to, and it is a very good idea to build all of your items in a fluid container when you are using Bootstrap. It does not define height and width. Okay, these talk about, and I'm surprised it jumps this far into it before it even talks about it, because it shows very early in the book. This is the grid layout, or otherwise known as the column layout, as far as how Bootstrap lays a page out. And these are the 12 columns per row that you are seeing, and it talks about, let's see if I can blow this up bigger to show you if it shows very clear at all. Oops, that might be enough actually. Yes. Okay, it shows you can choose to do, if you want to put bigger columns, you can choose to do like 2 and 2 if you want, and only take up 6 columns for actually one half of your row, and then 6 columns for the other half. Or you can make the whole thing 1 column. Or on the, here's an example of a larger one, which is using 8. So as you can see, but keep in mind 12 is the maximum you can go for a row. So for instance, if you had one that was 6 wide and one that was 7 wide after it, the 7 wide would drop down to the next row because it's more than the 12 columns. So keep in mind 12 columns maximum per row when you are designing. Okay, that's an important thing that you need to definitely remember. Otherwise, you'll find yourself getting into a mess. Okay, let's talk a minute about offset. Offset is a case of when you first have a row, your row is butted right up to the left-hand side. But if Dreamweaver has a little button kind of thing that if you drag to the right, you can actually move the start of the column or start of the row over a column or two, and that's called offset. So let's say you want to make an offset on the left and an offset on the right. Okay, you could drag the left one over one column, the right one over one column, and it would stay balanced between those two columns. It's a really interesting concept, and it works really, really easy in Dreamweaver. And we will play with offset and you'll see how that works. But it's a very cool feature, and really it's much, much better than trying to float something right or left and not have it fall the way it's supposed to fall. So it's definitely a very cool feature in Bootstrap. Another important feature in responsive design are responsive images. Okay, so that's something that you want to make sure, and we will use an image fluid class for this as we're going through the project. Now this one ended up being a little bit tricky, and this is hiding bootstrap elements or showing bootstrap elements, and it all ends up being with the title. And it's the D block and the D none and the display block or display. Okay, and how they have you do this is you, in the class field, you put either D block, which means it's visible, or D none, which is not visible, and you do not use equals. That is just a dash. So the problem I ran into is I tried to use the equal sign between the D and the block and the D and the none, which did not work. It is just a dash. So keep that in mind when you're working in that section. And if you have two pictures, watch what I do in the videos or it won't work. It is a little bit tricky on this one as we're going through the lesson. One thing that you have not been introduced before, which is available, are CSS3 transitions. There are some transitions that you can do, which is technically an animation that you do not need an animation program for. And we will be doing some CSS3 transitions towards the end of this chapter, which I think you will find quite interesting. And you didn't even know they existed, but there are some that you can use. and that's a little bit more on it. Anyway, that covers a real basic introduction into what we will be covering in this chapter.